don't get out a week, 2 weeks early though.
When does school go till next week?
Well,
But we don't have to worry about it.
Wait till.
yeah.
Yes. All right, so when it comes down to thinking about ways in which we need to capitalize letters, here are a few rules when we think about capitalization. I know many of you, when you write, you get a little confused. Well, do I capitalize this? Do I not capitalize this? Even though I'm talking about my own father, do I have to capitalize the name? So, of course, places where you capitalized, first word in a sentence or a direct quote. Meaning if someone said it, it needs to be capitalized, that first letter of that first word. Name of persons in the word I. Of course, I will always pop up as capital letter when we type. And any name, meaning formal name of a person, we should capitalize. Name of particular places. Toma High School needs to be capitalized. It's a capital letter for Toma High School. And then, of course, names of the days of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all need to be capitalized. Months and holidays. So holidays like Easter, or thinking about Christmas. Names of commercial products. So if we're talking about chapstick, if it's chapstick brand, it needs to be capitalized. If we're just talking about I'm using chapstick, if we're talking about a general type, does not need to be capitalized. So when it's a name, it needs to be capitalized. Commercial products, like Kleenex, capital K on Kleenex for the Kleenex brand. Names of organizations, groups, associations, companies, unions, and clubs. So clubs here at the high school, drama club, interact club, all of those would need to be capitalized. Titles of books, magazines, newspapers, articles, stories, poems, films, TV shows, songs, and papers, all of those need to be capitalized. So when it's a formal title, names that show family relationships like mother, father, sister, brother. In these instances, we need to then capitalize. School courses, so just like in here, you'd be College Prep 1. Those College Prep, CP, need to be capitalized. Languages, French, Spanish, English, Zulu, all of those would need to be capitalized. Geographic locations, northwest, southeast. When we're talking about specific locations. Historical periods and events, the Civil War would also need to be capitalized. Other historical events, World War I, World War II. We capitalize the W in both World Wars. Races, nations, and nationalities. So anytime that we know a person and where they're from, their background, we would then capitalize that as well. And then, of course, the opening and closing of a letter. So, dear so-and-so. The dear will always have to have a capital letter. And then finally, when we're signing it off, sincerely, very respectfully. All of these places would need capital letters. All right, numbers. Here's the rule for numbers. Spell out numbers you can write in 2 words or less. But for numbers, you need to spell out numbers that you can write in 2 words or less, like 100, that's 2 words. 10, that's 1 word. So 2 words or less, we're asking you to write them out versus putting them in numeric form. So when it's a big number, of course, you need to write it numerically. When it's a smaller number, you need to spell it out. So 2 words or less, you need to write it versus write it fully out with the spelling versus just writing the number. All right, thinking about the apostrophe. This is one of the best places that I found information about the apostrophe. And of course, it's because people still confuse what the apostrophe is or why we use it, why it's even in our writing today. And there are a few good reasons why we actually use an apostrophe and we find out how to use it correctly. So of course, the apostrophe has only a handful of uses, but these uses are very important. A misplaced apostrophe can be annoying, not to mention lonely. An apostrophe, when it changes places, it can change from possession, it can change from singular to plural, it can change a lot. So the first way we use an apostrophe, of course, is to create possessives, meaning we show possession by just placing in an apostrophe. Of course, the number one way you probably use an apostrophe is by using it as a contraction. So instead of spelling out not, an apostrophe T. And of course, the apostrophe is used to create plural forms of words. Alright, so in this sense, the apostrophe is used to create possessive forms for singular and plural nouns, especially nouns referring to people. So saying the mayor's car or my father's mustache. Well, there's only one mayor and only one car, so that car must be his. And then my father's mustache, hopefully that mustache only belongs to your father. Alright, and then Pedrito's sister and Joe Kennedy's habits. Well, that sister belongs to him because they're related. It shows relationship. And Joe Kennedy's habits, well, of course, only Joe Kennedy can have those habits. Alright, when a noun already ends in S, you can decide whether or not to use another S after the apostrophe. So in this, that's the choice. Many will be putting in an apostrophe S and say, you know what, that's not correct. I just need the apostrophe. Either way, in English rules, is correct. Meaning, if you have S and then an apostrophe, great. If you have S apostrophe S, even though it's redundant, it is still great. So here, Charles's car or Charles' car. And with multisyllabic words, don't add another S after the apostrophe. So multisyllabic, meaning more than one syllable. Because you wouldn't say Dumas's second novel and Jesus' birth. So when it comes out to multi-syllable words, stop with the one S. Now in writing, if you are not saying this, if you think back to the rules, if you use that second S, of course, written, it would not be incorrect, but you would never say Dumas's.
How come you say Charles's?
Charles.
Thinking.
Right. So That's what I'm going back and pointing out. If you write it out that way, it's not that it's incorrect, but learning the rules correctly means don't add another S. So multisyllabic words. So, of course, with Charles, that's the best instance to show you. It's best to just leave it as Charles apostrophe, not put the second S. When it comes down to Dumas's or Jesus's, you can automatically see the instance where we create that second S and it causes confusion. And it just adds another S's. And with Charles, most of the time, either way you have it written, you would still say Charles' car. You wouldn't say Charles's car. So we're saying the correct way to actually write it and say it is S apostrophe in multisyllabic words. All right, so Socrates' ideas. And then the best one, the state right below us, Illinois. So you'd say Illinois' legislator. All right, to form the possessive of an inanimate object, we're usually better off using an of phrase, but the apostrophe possessive is not impossible, especially with expressions of time and impersonifications. So here, instead of using the apostrophe for the roar of the grease paint, even though it shows possession that the grease paint was roaring, you can use the of phrase to actually show the possession. The smell of the crowd. So a year's salary and my heart's desire, your dollar's worth, the paper's conclusion. To form the possessive of a plural noun, we pluralize first and then add the apostrophe. So anytime we put the apostrophe S after it, it's showing possession, ownership, and of course the S after the apostrophe doesn't make the word plural. So the Kennedy's house belonging to more than one Kennedy. The children's playhouse. And the traveler's expectations. The only word that, of course, it goes apostrophe S is the word children because it's an irregular verb and an irregular noun. So, of course, children is plural in and of itself. It doesn't need an S at the end. And notice that with an irregular plural, the apostrophe will come before the S. So, in the sense of children. All right. With an apostrophe, we can also use a contraction, and a contraction allows us to blend sounds by omitting letters from a verb construction. The apostrophe shows where something is left out. In this case, most of the time the apostrophe shows that the letter O is left out of the word. All right, I am a student here means I am a student here. Shows where you are going, and of course, it allows the verb to flow together. And in this sense, if you were singing the song, I've been working on the railroad, if you had to say, I have been working on the railroad, it would not make a very good song and wouldn't flow as accurately. So, of course, in the song and in the sense, they use contractions to help the flow and the movement. All right, and with this helping verb, they could have been great together, they could have been great together. All right, a few more contraction examples. All right, let us go equals let's go. Who is there to who's there? It is Deidre to it's Deidre. Of course, one thing to think about, it's is a contraction for it is. The possessive of it is its with no apostrophe. So depending on whether you're showing possession or you're showing a contraction, it's two different things for the word it. All right, with the mighty apostrophe, the apostrophe is also used to form the plural of digits and letters. So, of course, here the word Mississippi has 4 S's, showing that S was used repetitively. She got 3 A's and 2 B's last semester. And she dotted all her I's very carefully. And these are all to indicate an omission of a number and a date. So summer of 99 and class of 38. Of course, hopefully many of you would know that this is 1999 and this is the class of 1938. Although we are coming back up to getting closer to 2038. The mighty apostrophe doesn't mind being used, but it wants to be used wisely. Use it well and it will be there whenever you need it. So, of course, one big thing that we're going to get to with our research paper writing is using quotation marks. And usually quotation marks are used to show what the speaker or the person is thinking. A comma and a period goes before the second quotation mark, meaning whatever punctuation we have to last put into our sentence or last put into our paper, it goes punctuation before the quotation mark. So, other places that we use quotation marks, when something is said indirectly that we don't need to use quotation marks. So, she stated that she wanted to go to the movies. Well, it's not her exact words word for word. So we don't need to use quotation marks there. But in instances of talking about short stories, you will then need to start off these works of short stories by quotation marks. So thinking about like in the Hunger Games, the chapter, you would call it scene. You'd put quotation marks around it. So a short story, if you wrote your own short story, you would then put it in quotation marks. That's how we would write that title correctly. Most of the time when it comes to books, you then italicize or you underline. When we're thinking about short stories or short pieces of work, we put it in quotation marks to know that it is a short story or a short piece of work. Commas. Commas are the number one piece of punctuation that are misused. Some people think that commas go in everywhere, and you might see people who just comma splice it all over the place. At the same point, you might have people who never use a comma. So the 6 main uses of commas. To separate items in a series, so meaning you're talking about more than 2 items, comma goes after each word. You might also use a comma to set off an introductory material or an introductory part of the sentence. So if you remember back to the D, comma, I, that was the introduction of that sentence. You might use a comma before and after words that interrupt the flow of thought in a sentence. So those were your positive phrases, meaning they were extra information to the sentence, but they weren't that important. And of course, you might use a comma before 2 complete thoughts connected by one of your coordinating conjunctions. So for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. You might use a comma to set off a direct quotation from the rest of a sentence. And of course, for certain everyday material. So of course, when it comes to commas, one place that I would like you to take a chance to view in the next few days is the Purdue OWL website. When we get into the computer lab later on this week, on Friday, I want you to go to the Purdue OWL website and I want you to view commas. They can show you better instances of how to write using commas and where to go. So of course, here are a few other punctuation marks. Does anyone know what these punctuation marks are? All right, so we have a semicolon, most likely an underscore, an underline, a hyphen, parentheses, and then of course we have our colon marks. Well, with the first one, a semicolon, if we remember back to what a semicolon is, it's a period followed by a comma. The next, an underscore or an underlining, mean we might be using it to create a title. And then, of course, our hyphen means that these two words need to go together. Most of the time, they make a separation of the words, but they make sure that the two words follow. If we use a parentheses in our paper, our paragraph, our writing, why would we have a parentheses? If we use parentheses inside our paper, most of the time it's saying, this is added information, this is a side note. And so, of course, with that side note, we'd use a page number, or we'd use it for a correct citation. And the last one, we have our colon. Why would we put a colon into a paper? All right, maybe a time or a listing. That's what I would definitely use these punctuation marks for. All right, so a colon. You can use a colon at the end of a complete statement to introduce a list, quotation, or an explanation. So, of course, if you want to talk about someone's direct words, you can use a colon before it. If you want to explain following the colon would be there to say, you know what, everything else that follows is my explanation. All right. In a minute, after we are complete, I want you to then use each of these punctuation marks correctly in a sentence. So if you want to hold your piece of paper. Next, then, we have a semicolon. Semicolons mark a break between two complete thoughts. With a semicolon, it breaks up two complete thoughts, and it tells that these two thoughts can't be broken up. It shows the relationship by putting a semicolon in between. Thinking about this as a dash or as a hyphen, a dash, used in the sense of the word dash, it signals a pause longer than a comma, but not as complete as a period. And it used the dash, of course, to create a dramatic effect by putting in these dashes to tell you know what, I want to take a pause, but it doesn't need a full comma here because most likely it won't be used correctly. And then thinking about it, that same symbol in a different sense is the hyphen. And of course, you use a hyphen with two or more words that act as a single unit describing a noun. So use a hyphen to divide a word at the end of a line of writing and when you need to hyphenate. So of course, in this sense, my word need is broken out using a hyphen correctly. And then finally, we have the parentheses. Parentheses are used to start off extra or incidental information from the rest of the sentence. And most likely it tells you, psst, I have something else I want you to say or I want to tell you. So right now, I'd like you to take the next few minutes. Use each of these punctuation marks correctly. When you are finished, I would like this turned in. So make sure your name is on it and it gets turned into the correct place. So write out, I'm looking for 5 full and complete sentences.